Well, it was a rough year for both Wall Street and Main Street. Wall Street suffering its worst year since 2008. Main Street seeing near record high inflation. But what about 2023? What is it going to bring? More cheers or more jeers? Let's ask economist Steve Moore, IRC Wealth CEO David Ragland, and former Dallas Fed advisor Danielle DiMartino Booth. Good to see you all. What a great panel. Danielle, first to you. I want to focus more on NASDAQ than the other indexes because that was down the most. It was down a third, 33% it was down. That's mostly due to the fact that when interest rates go up, which they've been doing to help with the inflation problem, all these startup companies for the high-tech companies who borrow money in order to start up go bust because they can't keep up with it. So where will interest rates, if interest rates keep going up, that's going to be even more bad news for NASDAQ, right?
It is. In fact, we've heard from some big employers like Hewlett-Packard, Intel Corporation, for example, Facebook, Meta, Google, that these layoffs are going to continue into the new year so that they can continue to cut their cost structure. And indeed, you're right. Rising interest rates are taking a big bite. And a lot of these companies have, only existed during a zero interest rate environment, especially the startups that you mentioned. So if the Federal Reserve, if Jerome Powell, chair of the Federal Reserve, is intent on continuing to raise interest rates, even by smaller increments into the spring, perhaps, that is going to continue to take a bite out of these companies' profit margins.
Yeah, and Steve, there are political implications for Wall Street, for Main Street, but also for politicians. California was depending on Silicon Valley to keep their ball going because during the pandemic, Silicon Valley did very well. People were at home. They used Facebook and the other high-tech companies. But now Silicon Valley's going down. They're not paying in the tax revenue. California had about a $58 billion surplus during the pandemic. It's expected to have a deficit of $25 billion next year because of this and because of the fact they're not getting any more COVID funding. So it's going to really hurt California even more than it already has been.
Yeah, no question, David. You know, California goes through these boom and bust cycles. It's been that way for 35 or 40 years, and they never seem to learn that what goes up sometimes comes down. And they are facing, and remember, they gave out all this money last year and they're writing rebate checks to people, and now they've got one of the biggest deficits in the country. So you're so right about that. Look, look at the economy right now, I'm looking at the leading economic indicators, David, and something like 8 out of 10 of those have turned negative. I was turning to a guy named Bob Funk, who's the head of one of the biggest employment firms in America. I talked to him just yesterday, David. He said he's not seen it so ugly since 2008 in terms of even hiring, and that's been the good news on the economy, right, David, is the employment market has been good, but that doesn't look so positive right now either. And then you ask the question, David, where is the growth going to come from? Are we going to get any good policies out of Washington? Are we going to get a tax cut? Are we going to get deregulation? Are we going to promote American energy? I don't see Biden doing any of that, and that's turning me very bearish.
David, we know what we're going to get. We're going to get another $2 trillion spending bill. That was just signed, and we'll talk about the politics of that later on in the show, but that would seem to indicate that we're not going to lick inflation on the basis of spending more money, are we? I mean, if anything, that's going to make inflation worse.
Oh, no question about it. Inflation is here. You know, the market is going to be under pressure, certainly in the first half of this year until we feel like inflation has started to plateau and peak and come down. We're starting to see a little bit of that, but not near the levels that we need to see overall. We've got to remember in 2009, right after 2008, the first half of the year was dreadful until the beginning of March. So look for the beginning of the year to have significant volatility. But with volatility becomes opportunity because what's not being priced into the market is all the bad news is in the market. Inflation, the Fed, corporate profits, the dollar. What's not being priced into it is when does Fed pivot? When does inflation come down? maybe the dollar comes down a little bit. So these things for average investors, yes, you're going to have to hold on to your seat for a while in next year, but don't miss out on the potential upside that is going to come eventually with the market bottom.
But I'm afraid to say, Danielle, that a lot of economists say the upside, we're going to have to wait for the upside because we're going to have a recession going into 2023. The more spending that they're doing in Washington, the higher the interest rates have to go to kill inflation, and that means more recession. And to Steve's point, that means that we may have job losses, which thankfully we haven't had much of over the past couple of years, but they may be coming with a recession, no?
David, it's apparent to me, at least, that they're already here. You've got the percentage of Americans collecting unemployment insurance. It's up 30.9% from its May low. That's quite a few people who are out there. And to Steve's point earlier, speaking to somebody who's on the ground in the recruiting industry, they're not able to find new positions. That's a big change from the last few years when if you could fog a mirror, you could find a job. Yeah. So, no, I think that there are definitely recessionary signals right now, David, and that it will be a little bit rough going into 2023.
Yeah, we got to gird ourselves, gird your loins, as they say in the Bible. All right, I wish we had more time, panel, but we had a lot of breaking news. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.